There's a strange thing that can happen after you've lived in the same home for 20 or 30 years. You get better at taking care of it, and somehow it seems to ask more of you. The counter you wiped yesterday is crowded again. There are shoes by the door, something waiting in the sink, a basket you meant to sort, and a drawer that seems to fill itself no matter how many times you organize it. None of it is a disaster. That's almost the problem. It's just dozens of tiny jobs, quietly asking for your time every day. And if keeping up with all of it takes a little more energy than it used to, the obvious answer is to clean faster, organize better, or finally buy the right storage. But Japanese homes led me to a different question. What if the easiest home isn't the one you clean most efficiently, but the one that creates less work in the first place? Look closely at ordinary Japanese routines. What happens at the entrance, what stays on the floor, how possessions are stored, and what people eventually decide to keep. And a pattern begins to appear. The smartest habits often happen before the cleaning begins. Let's start at the front door, because that's where some of tomorrow's housework can be stopped before it ever gets inside. In many Japanese homes, the first little system is visible the moment you enter. The genkan. It isn't simply a place to leave shoes. It creates a physical boundary between outdoors and the living space. Think about what the soles of those shoes have carried all day. Dust from a parking lot, grit from a sidewalk, moisture from the rain, whatever was on the floor of the grocery store or the train station. If those shoes continue through the house, some of that becomes tomorrow's sweeping, vacuuming, or mopping. At the genkan, much of it simply stops. And that's what makes the habit interesting. It doesn't make anyone better at cleaning the floor. It reduces how much cleaning the floor asks for in the first place. Prevent the work before improving the work. And here's the part that's easy to miss. The genkan usually sits a step lower than the rest of the home, a small drop in the floor. That little step isn't decoration. It's a line you can feel with your feet. Outside stays below. Inside stays above. There's even a word for this way of thinking. Uchi and soto. Inside and outside. Not just walls and doors, but a real sense that the home is a different kind of space, kept separate on purpose. And the clever part is what that design does to the habit. You don't need discipline to remember to take your shoes off. The step reminds you. The lower floor reminds you. The space itself does the work of the rule, so no one has to think about it. That's the whole difference between a habit built on willpower and a habit built on design. One asks you to remember every single day. The other simply happens. Some people even turn their shoes to face the door as they step up, so the next time they leave, the shoes are already pointing the right way, ready to slip into. A tiny thing, but it's one less small fumble on the way out. And you don't need a Japanese entrance to borrow any of it. Maybe your version is one washable mat, one place for the shoes you actually wear, and indoor slippers nearby. Nothing elaborate. Just one boundary between what belongs outside and what you want to manage inside. And, if you can, one spot that makes the habit automatic instead of something you have to remember. But shoes and street dust are the easy part, because some of the housework we create never comes through the front door. Sometimes it's already sitting on the kitchen counter. Now look at the kitchen counter. Imagine two identical kitchens. In the first, the counter holds a coffee maker, a knife block, 3 vitamin bottles, a fruit bowl, yesterday's mail, olive oil, and a toaster that gets used twice a week. In the second, most of that counter is open. Now wipe them both. On the open counter, the job takes one motion. On the crowded one, you pick something up, wipe underneath it, put it back, Move the next thing, wipe again, and repeat. Nothing on that counter looks like housework until you have to clean around it. We usually think about possessions in terms of how much space they occupy, but every object left on a working surface can also create a tiny recurring job. You move it, you wipe around it, dust collects behind it. Tomorrow, you do some version of it again. This doesn't mean your kitchen should look like a magazine, and it certainly doesn't mean hiding the coffee maker you use every morning. The better question is, does this object earn the work it creates? If you use it every day and it makes life easier, probably yes. If you haven't touched it since Christmas, maybe the counter doesn't need to keep working around it. Tomorrow, before reaching for the cloth, choose just one thing you rarely use. Give it another home, then wipe. But counters have one advantage. We can see when they're crowded. The floor is more deceptive. Now look down, not at whether the floor is clean, at what the floor has quietly become responsible for. A shopping bag waiting to be emptied, a basket of magazines, 2 extra pairs of shoes, a box you meant to take upstairs, maybe a small stool that somehow found a permanent home in the hallway. Most of these things arrived as temporary, but leave something on the floor long enough and you begin adjusting your life around it. You step over the bag, you vacuum around the basket, you move the box to clean underneath it, then put it right back. Eventually, you stop seeing the object. But your body never stops navigating it. This is one reason open floor space in Japanese rooms is more interesting than it first appears. Traditional Japanese living developed around rooms that could change function, rather than being permanently filled with one purpose. And there's a concrete habit behind it. In a traditional home, the futon didn't stay out all day. Each morning it was folded and tucked into a closet built for it, the oshire, and the bedroom quietly became a living room again. The same floor did 2 jobs, because nothing was left to claim it permanently. The point for us isn't to copy a traditional Japanese room. It's the principle hiding inside it. Space can be useful precisely because it is not permanently occupied. You don't need an empty house to feel that. Start with one path, your bed to the bathroom, your kitchen to the dining table, your favorite chair to the front door. Let the floor along that route do only one job, be a floor. But once you clear things from counters and floors, another question appears immediately. Where does everything go? And that's where most of us reach for the obvious answer. Storage. A basket, a bin, another shelf. It sounds like the solution, but this is where the story takes a turn. So now we have a clearer entrance, more room on the counter, a floor that can finally just be a floor. And sooner or later, the same question appears. Where do I put everything else? This is usually when organization begins. A basket for the mail, a bin for the bathroom, another container for the pantry, a few drawer dividers. And for a while, it feels wonderful. Everything has a place. Problem solved. Except, months later, the baskets are full. The drawers are full. And now we're shopping for something to organize the organizers. That was where looking at Japanese household research changed the question for me. Studies of living goods management in Japan have found that storage problems aren't simply about whether a home has enough space. Many households report inconvenience around owning and storing possessions, while sorting and tidying are often postponed, even when people know they'd rather deal with them earlier. That distinction matters. Storage can organize what you own. It cannot decide whether you still need to own it. Imagine 20 things on a table. Put all 20 into a beautiful basket. The room immediately looks cleaner, but count them. There are still 20 things. You still have to remember what's inside. sort through it, move it, or eventually decide what to do with it. The basket changed where the work lives. It didn't necessarily remove the work, and this isn't an argument against storage. Good storage can make a home dramatically easier to use. The problem begins when storage becomes the automatic answer to accumulation, because then we may become better at hiding work rather than reducing it. So instead of immediately asking, "Where should this go?" try asking something first. Why am I managing it at all? Not, would a minimalist keep it? Just, does this still have a useful place in the life I'm living now? Sometimes the best place for something isn't another basket. Sometimes it doesn't need a place in your home anymore. Start with the easy things. Not photographs, not letters, not the dishes your mother gave you. Open one kitchen drawer. Maybe there are 4 wooden spoons, but you always reach for the same 2. 3 peelers. Takeout containers without matching lids. A gadget that promised to save time and somehow created another drawer to organize. If you arrange all of it beautifully, you have a better drawer. If you remove what you genuinely don't use, you have less drawer to manage. That's a different outcome. Japanese housing research has documented a very ordinary problem. Unused belongings can fill storage until the things people actually use have nowhere convenient to go and end up left out instead. So don't begin with a room. Begin with one low-emotion category. Duplicate utensils, old containers, toiletries you no longer use. Give yourself 10 minutes. And instead of asking, "How can I organize these better?" ask, "Which of these am I actually willing to keep managing?" Because the work doesn't begin when an object becomes clutter. It can begin the moment we bring it home. Think about something completely ordinary. A bowl. You see it in a store for $20. You like the shape and the color, and you can already imagine it in your kitchen. So you bring it home. And that's usually where we stop calculating the cost. But the bowl keeps going. You decide where it lives. If the cabinet is full, something moves. The bowl gets washed, dried, put away, taken out again. Maybe it eventually sits on the counter because there isn't quite enough room. Years later, perhaps you rarely use it, but you still store it, move it, and make room for it. Until one day you're holding the same bowl, asking, "What am I supposed to do with this?" The $20 purchase happened years ago. The little jobs continued. The price tag tells us what an object costs to buy. It doesn't tell us what it will cost to own, in space, attention, cleaning, and decisions. That doesn't make possessions bad. A bowl you use every morning may be worth every inch of shelf space. A pan that makes dinner easier may save far more work than it creates. The useful question is simply, is this worth managing? And that question becomes especially interesting beside a Japanese idea many people already know, mottainai, the reluctance to waste something that still seems to have value. That instinct can be beautiful. It can encourage care, repair, reuse, and respect for what we already have. But when it comes to older households, that same strong sense of mottainai can also be one reason unused belongings quietly stay stored for years. So perhaps respecting an object doesn't always mean keeping it forever. Sometimes it means using it, passing it to someone who will, or deciding, deliberately, that its job in your life is finished. That brings us to the harder question. What about the things we've carried with us for 30 or 40 years? Somewhere in almost every long-lived home are things that don't fit neatly into an organizing system. The things that carry a life. Dishes used only at Christmas. Your children's books, though the children have homes of their own. Photographs from before photographs lived on phones. Letters. A dress that remembers a particular evening. Maybe a jacket that belonged to someone who isn't here anymore. These things are different. You can't evaluate them like an extra vegetable peeler. And you shouldn't. Some things are difficult to sort not because they're heavy. They're difficult because they mean something. Research on how older households sort their belongings suggests something many of us already feel. People often recognize, well ahead of time, that categories like clothing, books, albums, and photographs will eventually need sorting, and yet those are exactly the decisions we tend to postpone, which makes sense. A plastic container is easy. 40 years of photographs are not. But deciding doesn't automatically mean throwing something away. Maybe you keep it, but now you know why. Maybe the dishes stop waiting for Christmas and come out for Sunday dinner. Maybe your daughter actually wants 3 of the cookbooks. Maybe you write a name and a date on the back of a photograph while you still remember the story. Maybe one box becomes the box worth keeping, instead of 5 boxes no one opens. The point isn't to erase your past. It's to remain the person who gets to decide what happens to the things that carry your story. There is dignity in that. So don't begin here. Learn the question on easy things first. Then, when you're ready, ask it gently of something that matters. Does this belong in the life I'm living now? And if it does, how do I want it to be part of that life? Keeping something deliberately is very different from simply never deciding. And that brings us to the last kind of work, not the work created by shoes, or counters, or bowls, the work we keep giving ourselves, because we've always been the one who does it. There's another kind of clutter we almost never talk about. It isn't sitting on a counter. You can't put it in a basket. It's the list of jobs we've quietly decided are ours. Maybe you've always been the one who cleans the windows, changes the sheets, moves the chairs before vacuuming, notices the refrigerator needs cleaning before anyone else does. After enough years, these jobs stop feeling like decisions. They simply become part of who we are. And there's something good in that. Taking care of a home can keep us moving. Cooking can be satisfying, folding laundry can be peaceful, gardening can be one of the best parts of the morning. The goal isn't to stop doing things, it's to notice which things are still giving something back. Maybe you enjoy making dinner, but dragging the heavy mixer down from a high cabinet has become the worst part. Keep making dinner, move the mixer. Maybe you love your garden, but hauling large bags of soil no longer feels like gardening. Keep the garden. Let someone else carry the bags. The question isn't, can I still do this? Very often you can. The better question is this where I want to spend my energy? That may be a more useful way to think about independence. Not proving you can still do every job alone, but keeping as much choice as possible over where your effort goes. Because the point of making a home easier isn't to do nothing. It's to have more of yourself left for everything that isn't housework. A walk after dinner, a book you keep meaning to finish, lunch with a friend, time in the garden when you're actually enjoying the garden, or simply sitting down with a cup of coffee while it's still hot. And when I looked back at the shoes at the genkan, the open counter, the clear path, the storage basket, even that $20 bowl, I realized they'd been pointing toward the same thing all along. We were never really talking about cleaning. We started at the front door with a pair of shoes. The lesson seemed almost too simple. Stop some of the dirt before it becomes cleaning. Then the counter showed us that ordinary objects can quietly create work. The floor showed us that even space can ask something from us. The storage basket revealed that organizing work isn't always the same as removing it. And that little bowl showed us something bigger. Sometimes housework begins long before we pick up a cloth. It begins with what we bring home, what we keep, what we postpone, and what we continue doing simply because we've always done it. So perhaps the most useful lesson here isn't really about having less. It's about having less to manage. That's different. A meaningful home doesn't have to be empty. It can be full of books, photographs, good dishes, plants, grandchildren's drawings, whatever makes it yours. The question is whether the home is supporting the life inside it, or quietly consuming the energy needed to live that life. You don't need to become better at managing everything. Maybe some things simply don't need to be managed anymore. So please don't finish this video and reorganize your whole house. Try something much smaller. Walk into the room that asks the most from you. Don't clean it yet. Just stand there and ask, what here keeps creating work for me? Maybe it's one appliance you constantly move, one basket you never sort, one awkward shelf, one pile that has become part of the furniture. Choose one, and instead of asking how to manage it better, ask, can I remove the job? That's enough for this week. One small job your home no longer needs to ask from you. A home should hold the things that make a life feel like yours. It should make ordinary days a little easier, and it should leave enough of you for the people, places, and small pleasures that have nothing to do with keeping a house. Because perhaps a well-kept home isn't one that constantly looks perfect. It's one that doesn't need all of you to stay that way. And nowhere does that idea become more practical than in the kitchen, where the same tiny movements happen dozens of times every day. That's where we'll go next.